It was supposed to be a policy debate until Tulsi Gabbard looked straight at Senator Kennedy and questioned his patriotism. The crowd went quiet. The host froze. Then, in just 13 seconds, Kennedy said one sentence and flipped the entire conversation upside down. Live on national TV, she walked in with the upper hand. She didn't leave with it. Like and subscribe. And tell us, is there ever a line you don't cross in politics? The studio lights were warm. The set was balanced, red, white, and navy blues in equal measure. The segment was pitched as America at a Crossroads, the next era of foreign policy. Live audience, 3 guests, a veteran news anchor moderating, calm, seasoned, and expecting nothing more than a well-behaved panel. At the center of the table sat Tulsi Gabbard, former congresswoman, combat veteran, independent firebrand with a gift for cutting through talking points. To her left, a Harvard International Relations professor, polished, long-winded, harmless. To her right, Senator John Kennedy, tireless, sharp-eyed, silent for most of the pre-show. The tone was civil at first. The first 20 minutes covered the standard ground: defense budgets, NATO strength, public distrust. Tulsi spoke with clarity and calm. Kennedy nodded occasionally, saying little, watching, until the anchor brought up a bill Kennedy had co-sponsored, a controversial amendment limiting foreign military spending unless full congressional approval was granted. Some say this signals retreat, the anchor offered, a pullback from global leadership. Tulsi didn't wait. She turned to Kennedy, voice even, words measured. Senator, with respect, I've worn the flag on my shoulder in combat. I know what patriotism looks like. Blocking strategic support to our allies in the middle of a global power shift doesn't look like it to me. The room shifted. A few murmurs, one cough, silence. The host blinked. Kennedy looked straight at her. No fidgeting, no microphone adjustment, just a slight tilt of the head, as if to ask, did you mean to say that out loud? Tulsi didn't flinch. She'd said what she meant. To her, it was policy, not personal. To everyone else in the room, it had just crossed into territory rarely touched on live TV. Kennedy didn't interrupt, didn't defend. He waited until the host tried to move on. That's when Kennedy finally spoke. And it would take him 13 seconds, no more, to flip the entire debate, the audience, and Tulsi's accusation back onto her. There was no buildup, no dramatic lean in. Kennedy didn't clear his throat or gesture for attention. He just spoke. Ms. Gabbard, patriotism isn't proven by where you've been. It's proven by who you protect when nobody's watching. Silence. Not the awkward kind, the kind that settles like gravity. The host blinked, unsure if that was the full response. It was. 13 seconds, one sentence, and somehow it hit harder than anything anyone had said in the first half hour. Tulsi's expression didn't break, but something in her posture shifted. A pause in her breathing, a small recalibration. Because Kennedy didn't insult her service. He didn't diminish her uniform. He reframed the entire accusation. Not with anger, but with principle. The Harvard professor turned his head slowly, eyes wide. Even the control room, according to a tech later interviewed, went completely still. Kennedy continued, I don't question your love for this country, ma'am. But if you think questioning blank checks for foreign wars is un-American, then maybe we need to ask what kind of country we're trying to protect in the first place. The crowd stirred, a quiet clap, then a few more. Tulsi leaned back, arms crossed now, not in defiance but in reassessment. She knew what had just happened. He'd turned her argument, a critique based on service, into a moral counterpunch about accountability. And he'd done it without ever raising his voice. The host tried to regain control. Let's remember this is a dialogue, not a courtroom. But it already was a courtroom. And Kennedy had just delivered the kind of closing line you don't respond to, I see the screen. You sit with. By the time of the show went to commercial, Twitter was already catching fire. Someone clipped the 13-second exchange and titled it, Kennedy just ended the whole segment in one line. It racked up 900,000 views in 20 minutes. The host came back from break smiling too tightly. Tulsi adjusted her mic, still composed, but the momentum had shifted. Because in a town where everyone talks in paragraphs, Kennedy had spoken in a single sentence, and it rewrote the entire conversation. The show returned from commercial. The moderator smiled tightly and tried to redirect. Let's shift to cybersecurity and long-term threat posture. But the room wasn't ready to move on, because the audience, both in studio and across the country, wasn't focused on future hypotheticals. They were still replaying what just happened. The clip of Kennedy's 13-second response had already been uploaded by 3 different news interns before the commercial even ended. And once it hit Twitter, it didn't stop. 113 seconds started trending globally. Not just in political corners, in classrooms, in veterans groups, on TikTok, even among comedians. It wasn't just what Kennedy said, it was how he said it. He hadn't attacked Tulsi's service. He hadn't postured or ranted. He'd told the truth, calmly, with zero ego, and made everyone else in the room recalibrate. Progressives were split. Some said Tulsi had a right to challenge decisions that affect national security. Others said she crossed a line, questioning the patriotism of a sitting senator who had consistently voted to keep troops out of endless war. Conservatives, on the other hand, rallied fast. Senator J.D. Vance reposted the clip with the caption, "This is what courage under pressure looks like." Even Elon Musk weighed in, replying, "He's right. Patriotism is accountability, not blind aggression." But the most unexpected voice came from a veteran. A retired Army colonel, once a Tulsi supporter, posted a short video from his car. "I like Tulsi. I still respect her. But Kennedy's right. Being a patriot doesn't stop at the tarmac. It's about what you demand of your government when it thinks no one's watching." That clip hit 1.4 million views in an hour. Back in the studio, the dynamic had changed. Tulsi remained poised, but her answers shortened. Not defensive, deliberate. Because whether she admitted it or not, she knew what Kennedy had done. He hadn't owned her. He hadn't humiliated her. He'd done something far rarer in modern politics. He reframed the moral high ground in real time. And now voters were asking questions. Who really gets to define patriotism? Is foreign policy criticism un-American? Or is it exactly what America was built for? These weren't side conversations anymore. They were the conversation. And neither Tulsi nor Kennedy could unspark it. Because when a 13-second sentence starts a national conversation, you don't move on. You lean in. The credits rolled. The panel shook hands. Polite, but distant. Tulsi nodded once to Kennedy. He returned the nod. No grudge, no smirk. Just 2 professionals who understood what had happened and weren't going to pretend otherwise. Kennedy didn't linger. He exited through the side hall before the stage crew even powered down the key lights. But someone followed. A young political reporter from the Hill, sharp blazer, notebook in hand, mic clipped to her collar, caught up with him at the elevator. "Senator Kennedy, do you have a minute?" He stopped, didn't smile, but he didn't walk away. "Sure, 1 minute." She asked him the obvious. "Did you plan that response to Tulsi?" Kennedy chuckled under his breath. "Darling, if I could plan that cleanly, I'd be president by now." She smiled, but he wasn't joking. "I didn't go in there to pick a fight, but I wasn't going to sit there and pretend that patriotism means agreeing with everybody who ever wore a flag." He looked toward the street. "You want to love your country? Fine. But loving it means protecting it from lazy decisions and loud ones." She leaned in. "Do you think Tulsi meant it personally?" He paused. "I think she believes what she believes. And I think she spent so much time being the outsider that she forgot what it feels like to be trusted with power." The elevator dinged. He stepped inside, then turned back for one last line. "Tell folks this, I don't take it personal. I just take it seriously." And the doors closed. The reporter stood there for a second, frozen. Not because of what he said, but because it was rare. No handlers, no spin, just honesty. She filed the story that night. Headline, "Kennedy walks off set and stays in the conversation." By morning, it was everywhere. MSNBC ran it under the banner, "The senator who let his silence speak louder." Fox opened with it. The View debated it. A high school civics teacher from Iowa printed it out and stapled it to a blackboard under the heading, Example, How to Disagree Without Losing Your Integrity. Because it wasn't just a comeback anymore, it was a case study, and it had started in just 13 seconds. It started in a high school civics class in Des Moines. Mr. Callahan, a 20-year veteran teacher, was running his annual unit on modern political discourse. Normally, students barely made it through the lesson without checking their phones. But this time, the phones were the lesson. A student had pulled up the Tulsi Gabbard clip, the full 13 seconds. Clean, calm, no edits, no background music. The class watched it once, then again, then a third time. Why does it hit so hard? One student asked. Mr. Callahan paused, because he didn't try to win. He just told the truth in the fewest words possible. They spent the rest of the period writing about it, not on who was right or wrong, but on what made the moment resonate. The local paper picked it up the next day. Headline, From the Senate to the Classroom, Kennedy's 13 Seconds Go Civic. But it didn't stop there. By Thursday morning, the clip was played on the Senate floor. Senator Tim Scott, speaking on the erosion of bipartisan dialogue, brought up the incident as an example of how disagreements should be handled. We don't need to agree on the strategy, but we need to stop acting like disagreement is betrayal. Kennedy reminded us of that, in 13 seconds flat. Across the aisle, Senator Brian Schatz, a Democrat, didn't object. In fact, he nodded. Because somewhere between the talking points and the outrage machine, Kennedy had done something almost extinct in American politics. He disagreed without making it ugly. He defended without making it personal. He responded without ever reacting. That same day, Tulsi Gabbard issued a rare follow-up. On her podcast, she addressed the clip directly. I don't regret challenging Kennedy, but I respect the way he answered me. We need more of that, especially from people in power. It wasn't a walk back, but it was acknowledgement. That mattered. Because in a climate where everyone fights to go viral, Kennedy had done it by doing the opposite. He slowed down. He spoke soft. And he told the truth. The clip continued to ripple. Military veterans reposted it with reflections. Church groups discussed it in weekend gatherings. College debate teams opened with it. But back in D.C., something more significant happened. A bipartisan resolution, stalled for weeks, gained 3 new co-sponsors after Kennedy's remarks shifted the tone. It had nothing to do with foreign policy. It had everything to do with trust. Because when one sentence can cross political lines, you don't ignore it. You follow it. The email came in quiet, no press blast, no hashtags, no campaign spin. Just a single-line invite from the same network that had hosted the Tulsi confrontation. Senator Kennedy, we'd like you back next week, one-on-one, primetime. He didn't answer right away. For 3 days, producers waited. When he finally replied, it was shorter than his 13-second response. Only if we talk about the country, not me. The producers agreed. But before the cameras rolled again, Kennedy made an unannounced stop, one that didn't make the broadcast. A small veterans roundtable was happening 2 blocks from the Capitol. It wasn't on his schedule. No cameras, no donors, just 20 men and women who had served. Quietly, without parades, without platforms. Kennedy showed up in a brown jacket and carried no notes. Someone there, a Marine who'd done 3 tours, asked him bluntly, "Did you mean to embarrass her?" Kennedy shook his head. Wasn't about her. Wasn't about me either. It was about what we let slide when the cameras are rolling and the country's tuned out. Someone else asked if he'd do it differently. If I had said nothing, the silence would have said more. I didn't speak to win. I spoke because the room needed to hear a line it could still believe in. That quote never made it to air, but someone in the room remembered it word for word, and when the senator left, they typed it out and posted it, anonymously. I didn't speak to win. I spoke because the room needed to hear a line it could still believe in. That line went viral again, but this time not as a political weapon, not as a dunk or a meme or a clip. It became something rarer, a standard. When Kennedy finally returned to the studio, it wasn't to repeat himself, it was to reset the tone. The host tried to bring up the moment again, tried to lead with, You've become a bit of a legend this week. Kennedy interrupted gently. I'm not here to be a story. I'm here to remind folks that not every disagreement needs a flag wrapped around it. Sometimes loving your country means pushing it to be better, even when it's uncomfortable. The audience didn't cheer. They listened. Because by now, they weren't watching a politician. They were watching someone who understood what it meant to speak once and let it echo. The lights dimmed. The interview was over. The host thanked Kennedy. The audience clapped, not performatively, but genuinely. It wasn't thunderous, it was solid. Like respect you don't have to be told to show. Kennedy stood, nodded once to the crew, and turned to leave. But just before stepping off the soundstage, the host called out, "Senator, do you have one final thought? Something you want the audience to take home?" Kennedy paused. He didn't walk back to the mic, didn't wave his hand or grandstand. He just turned slightly and said, "Patriotism ain't loud, but it remembers everything." 7 words, then silence. The audience didn't cheer. They sat still, as if trying to memorize the exact phrasing. And then they rose. Not because it was scripted, not because it was expected, because truth has gravity. That clip, just 7 seconds long, was reposted more than the original 13-second debate. It made it into graduation speeches. It showed up in military retirement ceremonies. It was quoted in a congressional hearing. It even appeared, scribbled in Sharpie, on a handmade sign taped to a diner wall in Baton Rouge. Patriotism ain't loud, but it remembers everything. Kennedy. And maybe that was the real story all along. Not a clapback, not a win, but a reminder that real patriotism doesn't yell. It doesn't posture. It listens. It watches. It endures. And when the moment comes, it speaks. Not to be liked, not to go viral, but to be remembered. Like and subscribe if you think truth still matters. And tell us in the comments, what does patriotism mean to you when nobody's watching?